Do this one more time. So, whenever you have a leading coefficient, a number in front of that x squared, I got a 5 right here, you need to multiply the first term times the last term if you want to think about it. Okay? That gives me 5 times 6 gives me 30. Now, we need to find factors of 30 . Factors of 30 that add up to be, we need a sum of whatever term's in the middle. They usually refer that to the B term. That's a negative 13. Okay? Does everybody understand that? So, let's factor out 30. Now, notice that's a positive 30 and that's a negative 13. Okay? So, when you go to factor this out, looks like you're going to need two negative numbers. Okay? Okay, so I got a negative 10 times a negative 3. Now, if you multiply that, you get 30. Positive 30 at that. Okay? And if you add those two terms together, you get a negative 13. All right? So.
But wait, where'd you get 30 from the other equation?
Okay, back on track here. Sorry, my screen got cleared. Now that we have figured out our two numbers that multiply to a positive 30, and they add up to a negative 13, we've figured out our two numbers that'll work. Now, some of you said, what happens to that x squared? Well, that's just going to stay the same right there. Okay? Now, what you put next is the two terms that you figured out that are factors of 30 and add up to a negative 13. We figured out it's negative 3 and negative 10. So, that's going to become a negative 3x and a negative 10x. Okay, whatever two numbers you find, all we're doing is essentially splitting up that negative 13 so that we can simplify. That's our main objective here. We need to split it up so we can simplify. As it is, at the very beginning, we can't simplify it how it is. Okay? All right? So, now what's at the very end? We got that plus 6 at the very end. So the only thing we changed was we broke that negative 13 into a negative 3 and negative 10.
Oh, that's what you did?
Almost. Now, I want you to factor out, I want you guys to break this up into essentially two separate things right here. If we factor this out, if we factored out the 5x minus 3x, just those two terms, that's all I want you to factor out. What's the greatest common factor of those two terms? Looks like the only term that can factor into either one of those is just x. Right? So if I factored out an x here, what's going to be left? Okay? So if I factored out an x from those first two terms, what's going to come out? I mean, what's going to be left? I'm going to have a 5x left. And I'm going to have a minus 3 here. Now, always, if you checked your answer right here and see if this is correct, if you multiply the x times the 5x, what am I going to get?
5x squared.
If I multiply the x times the 3,
Negative 3x.
so I'm good. That means I factored it out correctly. Okay?
This makes sense.
Now,
I got it until you started writing up there.
Yeah, I got it. So I'll doing that now.
okay, so if I factored out the negative 10x and the plus 6, what is the only term that you could, what is the greatest common factor of those two terms? 2. Okay? Now, is it a positive 2 or a negative 2?
I'm confused. She doesn't know the 3.
Positive 2. 2 goes into 6. and 2 goes into negative 10x.
Are you talking about the other
Yep.
one? Oh, okay.
Wait, why are you doing that? You're too off.
Now he's talking about the other term.
Gage, you're really annoying me. Stop this.
I'm really hot.
Okay, take your hoodie off.
Hot.
Okay. Now what's going to be left over there? Looks like I'm going to have a negative 5
Plus 3.
plus 3. Good. Okay, good. Now,
Wait, why did you do X in the 2?
That's why you put X.
What did you do?
okay, so I need to make that negative 5x plus 3. I need to make this the same here. And we can do that because, first of all, I have the same numbers. The only thing that's different is the signs in front of them. Now, if you guys remember correctly from what we learned a couple weeks back, I can change these signs if I can essentially factor out a negative 1. Now, the only thing that's going to change is what?
The 2.
That's going to become what?
A negative.
A negative 2. Okay? Good job. So if I factor out a negative 1 right there, that makes that a negative 2. And then it changes all my signs inside my parentheses right there.
So you times everything by negative 1. No, that'd be minus 3. So your timings everything by
Thank
negative 1. Saba.
Hold on. So I'm going to rewrite my left side. It's going to stay the same. Okay? Notice now,
Oh, so you times one side. They're saying
I have a 5x minus 3 and a 5x minus 3. Those are common. Those are identical. Okay? So the last thing to this is I can group together those terms, and I can group together the x and the negative 2. So if I did x minus 2, and I would have my 5x minus 3. That'd be your answer. That'd be your factored form. Can't factor how it is right now. Okay? Why?
5 times 10 is 50.
Right off the bat, we need to multiply our 5 times our 10. Okay? Now when we do that, that gives me 50. Great. That's what we're looking for. Now, we need factors of that number we just found. So we need factors of 50 that add up to be what?
47.
Ha ha ha.
So you go ahead and try the one that's 25.
Okay? So, yes, let's just try the no-brainer one.
No, 25 to 2. What are
We got 25 times 2. That gives me 50, and if you add those together, you get 27. So there's my bingo. Okay? That works. So now we can split up that 27x so that we can factor this thing out. So let's do that. We have our two numbers now. So I'm going to keep my 5x squared in front. That's just hanging out. Now here's the difference. Instead of 27x, I got plus 25x, because that's one of the numbers, and then the other number is 2, so I'm going to put plus 2x.
Wait, what did you do, 25? Oh, never mind.
Our two numbers that we found, 25 times 2. Yep, you're fine.
So this is called factor. What's the other thing called for? The one we probably just did, what's that called? The same.
Okay, so we split our 27x so that we can factor this thing out. Now, let's go ahead, put our parentheses right here, and let's find our greatest common factor of these numbers. Now, only two numbers we need to look at is 5x squared and 25x. If you factor that out, what is the greatest common factor? 5x. Factored out the 5x. What I have left is an x, because if you think about it, 5x times x, 5x squared. Good. What I have left over here, I got a 5. Because if I multiplied 5x times 5, I get 25x. Good, great. Now, next thing. Let's factor out the 2x and the 10. What's my greatest common factor of these two terms? A 2. Now, what's going to be left?
In parentheses, x plus
Christian, please stop.
5. X plus 5.
Stop, please. Okay? Now, what's left? All I have left there is an x. Because think about it. 2 times x gives me 2x. Good. What do I have left here? I got a 5. 2 times 5 gives me 10. I'm good.
Hey, so obviously use the first in the parentheses, correct? Do the thing like you put 5x and then 2x.
I have an x plus 5 and I have an x plus 5. Great, grand. That means we can group these terms together. I can group together my 5x, which is in the very front. I can group together the 5x and the positive 2. Make sure you have your signs correct. So I got a 5x plus 2. And I have 2x plus 5. So that means we can kind of essentially group those together.
X squared plus 10.
And I got my x plus 5.
Oh, you just do x plus 5.
Yeah, you don't multiply those two terms.
You don't times 2.
So you would take the.
Okay, so you can FOIL to check it out. First, outer, inner, last. Once you do that, you get the exact same answer as what you get. If I have a number right here to begin with, that tells me I need to multiply 3 times 35. That gives me 105. Okay? 3 times 35 gives me 105. Now, we need a factor of this number, and it needs to add up to be 26. That number in the middle. Now, what's a factor of 105? That adds up to be 20.
21 and 5.
So if I do 21 times 5, that gives me 105. Good. If I add those together, I get 26. There's my bingo. Okay? That works. Now, we have our two numbers. So, I'm going to write my 3x squared. I'm going to write my positive 21x. And I'm going to write down my positive 5x. Thank you. And lastly, I need to write down my plus 35. Now, I want you guys, if you want to think about it like this, draw a line right down the middle so that we can factor out each side. Okay? That's what we're doing. We're factoring out each side. Now, the greatest common factor of those 3x squared and plus 21x is going to be 3x. What's going to be left inside? I'm going to have an x here. Remember, check your answer. 3x times x, 3x squared. What's going to be left inside is going to be another 7 right here. Because 3x times 7 gives me a 21x. All right? Now, factor out the next one. Looks like we can factor out a 5. What's going to be left? An x. 5 times x. 5x. Good. Matches the top. And a 7. Because 5 times 7 gives me a 35. So that matches the top also. So we're good. Last thing you need to do is group your terms together. Whatever's in front of the parentheses or outside of it, group those together. I have a positive 3x and I have a positive 5. Now because I have identicals x plus 7s, I can group those together, and I have my x plus 7 down here, and I can drop that down. Because I have 2 of those, I can essentially bring it down to 1. That's your answer. Now, if you FOILed that out, you would get the same exact answers. What we started out, the same exact, really, formula as what we started out with. That 3x squared plus 26x plus 35.